What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 for Earnhardt of the Rick Mast Show. I'm Charlie Marlowe. That is the great Rick Mast. Rick, how are you doing this morning, sir?
If I was any better, I don't know what I'd do, Charlie. Everything's just peaches and roses right now. Everything's
I
good.
love it. I love the positive attitude. All right, coming off a really positive NASCAR race. I don't know how anybody. We always joke about how people always find a way to complain about anything. Like this race, for example, Jeff Gluck does the "Was this a good race?" and 96% of people said yes. And it's even like, who are the 4% that can actually complain about an amazing race and an amazing finish, the closest finish in NASCAR history, 0.001 seconds, Kyle Larson edging out Chris Buescher. What did you think of Kansas, sir?
Well, it's like, dang, I mean, the end was good because these green and white checkers always do that. But the race was good all the way through. If you remember, we the first part of that race was the five and whoever it was running side by side, for the lead forever. Then a couple other cars ran side by side. And if you look back through the camera angles, you see everybody behind running side by side. And this is like at a mile and a half racetrack. The tracks that we used to hate or loathe watching, or the fans, at least they told us on X or Twitter, they hated it. It's these tracks have now turned into the best races, right? So they then come down to the end when you had the closest finish in NASCAR history. I mean, we've had some close ones, dude, but never one quite like that. And it was historic because of the finish, right? You couldn't tell who won. And then I love the people talking about the white line. Everybody raising Cain about the white line. It's the one showed the one car won, the other line showed the other car won. And then when NASCAR finally come out with that little laser deal they had superimposed on it, then that's what really told the story. So, man, what a cool deal. We got to get this car. We've got to get this car doing that on the short tracks now. I mean, the speedways they're running side by side, but they're running half throttle because of fuel. They can fix that. But the short tracks, and to me, it comes down to either the tire and or an engine deal, right? And that's what you keep hearing. We need more horsepower. All the competitors want more horsepower. NASCAR's pretty adamant. We're not going to give you more horsepower. Well, I think somewhere between the tire and the horsepower is probably where the answer is because they've exhausted all the aerodynamic possibilities on the short tracks. That's just not going to work. So what are you left with? A different car design? No, we're not going to do that. We got to use what we got. So then what's that leave you? You got four little tiny contact patches on the bottom of that tire, like this. You can see this. That's all connects that car to the racetrack. So everything works off those contact patches. So on a short track, let's do something to that tire, either make it go away quick. Well, I'll tell you a novel idea I thought about coming in this morning. What if we tried a real super hard tire one time? Because what they're talking about is the tire falling off and not having any grip and everybody slipping and sliding, and it seems to make the race better. Well, do the soft tire like you did at Bristol. That was a little bit extreme. You got to back up from that a little bit, or put a tire on there that's like hard as a brick. So when the guys go to the corner, they're sliding all over the place. They're coming in and raising hell at NASCAR because this tire is no good. It won't stick. Try that one time. See what that does. That and horsepower. I mean, that's the only thing I know to do. But my goodness gracious, what a good race at Kansas. Of all places, of all places.
Yeah, so explain to folks on that last restart what happens when you're in the car and Denny Hamlin, who ended up finishing fifth, but he said, "Look, the way it was with Larson and Busher, he became the parachute there." Explain to folks how that happens, and then also, I mean, when it got down to Larson and Busher, what'd you think of the strategy there? Larson beats and bangs, does some door driving at the end. What'd you think of all of that final restart?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's just it's it's like so many of these restarts everywhere we go now. You make one or two moves, and then that kind of sticks you into what's gonna stick you into what happens because the momentum on each line, right? Then you get suckered in the middle, or what? All these things play in. It's really, gosh, a multiple of things that come into play in just a few seconds, and you only get a chance to make a couple moves. And if you make the wrong move early, you're done. That's what happened to Hamlin. He made a wrong move early, right? And he became the parachute. What that meant was he was in the middle of the cars on the outside and inside of him, and those guys are throwing out this big wake of air and from like he's on the inside of a car, he's hitting the air off of that car. He's on the outside of a car, he's hitting the air off of that car, right? And he's just boom, the air has got him in the nose. Those guys are going on, they're throwing off air, and he's trying to push that air. Well, he can't push it, so it goes backwards. That's what that's all about. Uh, you know, and then the deal with like Busher, I mean, I've heard a couple people criticize he should have moved up higher to block, and he could have done that. He could. When you saw that he needed to, when everybody, if you're watching the race and you see about the time that the car is right behind Busher on the outside, you think, well, he can move right now. Or at that moment, it was too late to move. If he moved then they're gonna wreck. The shot he had was maybe 2 seconds before that to move up high to block the high lane. Well, if he'd have done that, it would have stopped that deal. But Larson would have turned under him, and he may have passed him clean, or he may not even got past his quarter panel. I don't know. But in Busher's defense, he did what I thought was his only move. The only thing different he could have done was moved up higher, quicker, but then that opens up the inside. So I don't know. Who knows? I do know that Busher was in the break a lot, right in that spot on the right. If you look at the telemetry, he was in the break real pretty hard at that spot. So, I'm not sure why he hit the brake so hard. If that's just what he had to do, the car got loose. He's trying to make it take a set. I'm not sure without talking to him what he was up to. I didn't look at the telemetry of the five. I don't know what they were doing. But anyhow, it still produced the greatest finish, closest finish in NASCAR history. And we got to witness it, dude. Cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I was just checking. I had to make sure. So your last cup race was 2002 Richmond. So then you wouldn't have been driving in '03 for the Darlington finish. And of course, we have Darlington coming up, but that was Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch.
Right.
So in your career, I'm sure you were watching that one, but what was the closest finish you can remember in your driving career?
Man, we won a race somewhere. Get where it was. And it was a close finish. But I don't know. In the cup, man, I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank because, unless when you're in that race and unless you're in that close finish to the win, it didn't really matter to you. You know what I mean? So I'm sure we had plenty of them, but because I wasn't involved in any of those, it didn't matter. I don't care. So probably, the closest finish that really wasn't that close was the gosh, what was the race when Pearson and Petty wrecked at Daytona in the 500? They wrecked on the front stretch. You remember that? And Pearson limped across the finish line. Petty couldn't get his car started. That was probably one of the more dramatic finishes that was close, that wasn't really close by a stopwatch. And everybody remembers that race.
Yeah, and then I think this came out again. Everybody was talking about it around Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, because the Atlanta finish was the three wide at the end, where it was really close between three. And I think it
Mm,
was one of the Daytona 500s, maybe in the 50s. Was Lee Petty involved? Where they literally, and don't correct me on that if I'm wrong, because I'm just going by
yeah.
memory from a couple months ago. But I feel like I remember reading that NASCAR didn't even declare a winner until a few days later. They had to go and get still photos to figure out who won.
Yeah, it was Lee Petty and I think Beauchamp, and they claimed Beauchamp, I think, won the race, and Lee Petty protested. They finally found somebody had a picture. It wasn't an official picture, but somebody had a picture that they took the track, and they got it developed that night somewhere somehow. And Lee Petty got a hold of this picture and went to France on Monday morning and said, "Look here, here's the picture of the race. I won this race." And sure enough, they reversed the decision and gave the race to Lee Petty. And I think after that is when they decided to start having photographers stand at somewhere where they could see start finish line and actually photograph cars coming across the finish line. Of course, those days you didn't have 6,000 frames per minute. You just kind of had what you had, right? So it wasn't the best, but I guess that thing kind of started that off. And I tell you another important close victory, an important close victory was the Kevin Harvick over whoever it was, Bobby, I forget the Atlanta race after we lost Earnhardt, and they go to, we go to Atlanta, we'll go to Rockingham after that, And then I think the next race is Atlanta after we lose Earnhardt. And then Harvick wins that race in dramatic fashion, man, just like half a bumper, you know. And that was probably the most dramatic close finish race.
Okay, I'm seeing it was 1959 was the Lee Petty, as you said, Johnny Beauchamp, and Beauchamp originally awarded the victory. A photograph taken by T. Taylor Warren proved Petty to be the winner. That's pretty cool. 1959. And that famous picture, I'll put it up here because I remember
Okay.
during Atlanta, I found that picture and it's pretty amazing to see that and the crowd and the old cars, what it looks like. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, T. Taylor Warren, he went on to become a racing photographer for years. He lived in the Martinsville area. You'd always see T. Taylor at Martinsville at a lot of the close races, Rockingham and Richmond and those places. But then he would go to some other places. But that was his first major claim to fame as a photographer, I think. And I'm not sure that he's a photographer at the time. I thought he was just a fan, maybe playing with photography. But after that, he became a NASCAR photographer, and that was cool for him.
Yeah, I think it's so funny too, and we've talked about social media a couple times here, and we probably will more so because it's so changed how we consume entertainment and sports. And I was laughing, and we have this meme culture, and I'm about to be 42, so even the kids, but they're all with these memes, the pictures and the gifs, the funny little photos and whatnot. And after the finish here at Kansas, I saw so many funny memes of, hey, the guy who painted the line, because that line was a little crooked. And it's just one of those funny things because nobody would have ever noticed. But then, of course, it comes down to the closest finish in NASCAR history. And now everybody's blaming the poor guy who painted the line.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's got to be a scapegoat for everything. Everything in
Yes.
life, you got to have a scapegoat. But I thought that was, and a couple of the guys got real serious about that. A couple of the racers, they were fussing about this white line, right? And I'm like, well, I know that NASCAR has a laser line on their camera system, right? And then they finally showed the photograph of the laser line, and I'm like, if I know there's a laser line on this start finish line, why do these couple drivers that's raising hell about this white line not know that, right? These guys need to go back and do a little homework and figure out what they're doing. I think because if they were being true, I guess they didn't realize where that little laser line was at. Because you really can't, you can't blame that. I mean, you can't get around that laser line deal. If everybody saw the picture that we're talking about, Charlie, that
Yeah.
if you haven't seen that, fans, go look that up. That'll show you that the clear evidence of the clear winner, and don't look at the crooked white line that's on the racetrack. That was pretty funny though.
Yeah, and you mentioned some drivers bitching about it. And I know Denny Hamlin talked about it on his podcast. And I have kind of a different theory on Denny Hamlin. Like I understand especially how, even my generation, but an older generation could say, "Man, these guys bitch about everything." I get that. But also, I think NASCAR is a sport that really benefits from these storylines, especially some of these midweek storylines that keeps everybody talking about NASCAR until the race the next Sunday. And Denny Hamlin, in my opinion, is perfect at that. And I understand maybe some people don't like him. They think he's bitching too much, but I also think he's doing this by design. He's very smart. And NASCAR is better when there's controversy and when somebody's always bitching about something. And I understand that people target him, but I think he's doing it on purpose. And I think it helps the sport to keep the storylines going week to week.
There's no doubt he's doing it on purpose, Charlie. I know that. You know it, and I know it. Uh, the thing that intrigues me is why is he doing it? Not why. I know why because it's driving a lot of things. It's driving interest. It's driving his brand up. The 23 brand. It drives all that. My question, and I'm gonna ask some. Maybe I get to him. I'm gonna ask him what caused this. What it all started after they did the 23 team, right? And then he got this podcast going and he's taken that role. He's taken on that role. But I just wonder if, the higher ups or the B's, the marketing people, the Michael Jordan groups, those folks say, Denny, you've got this kind of persona about you already. Why don't we throw it out there some more? Okay. Be yourself. Tell exactly what you want to tell. and let's see where this thing goes. I got an idea that there are some discussions that maybe prompted this more than just it naturally occurred. And I think you're exactly right. It's definitely on purpose. I absolutely love it, man. I absolutely love it. It gets a lot of play, right? A lot of people talk about it. As long as you don't make your fellow competitors upset by your stuff you say, right? As long as you don't get on there and like, you had some trouble with a guy and you get on and say, well, that guy wrecked me, but whatever, right? But if you get on that show and you start harping on something like that with a fellow competitor, then that's going to create problems. And he hasn't done that. I know he's smart enough not to do that, right? But because the other competitor doesn't have that venue or that outlet to tell his side of the story. So, but what he's done right now is it's real interesting to watch this because this is really the first time we've had a driver, with this outlet doing what he's doing, right? And it does create fodder for a lot of people, a lot of journalists, but it also it really it again it's building his brand. I think the Denny Hamlin brand, and that goes hand in hand with his sponsorship, with his team ownership. So again, it's cool. We'll see what happens.
And along those lines, so I agree with you. I think at least half of it is he knows it's good for the brand and the sport to keep it going. But then I also think in the last year or so, I do think he's genuinely pissed now as a car owner with what is going on with these charter negotiations. So I want to get your take on that because so we recorded last week, I believe, on a Wednesday. Michael Jordan comes out, New York Times, and says NASCAR as a sport could die if the owners if there's not a and I'm paraphrasing here, but he
Right.
said, if everybody's not healthy, the track's got to be healthy, NASCAR's got to be healthy, but he said all these teams also have to be healthy. And then Denny Hamlin is on the Dale Jr. download, and he says the tracks in NASCAR, again, I'm paraphrasing, but I believe he said they're making 9-figure profits per year, and he said the teams are at 7-figure losses per year, which I think most people would agree that can't continue in any
Mm-mm.
sport for it to be
Right.
healthy. So I'll just throw it to you. And any take on what's going on with the charter negotiations?
Yeah, you know what, Charlie? This thing. We're talking about charters, but it's no different than anything. Or how can I say this? Let me back up. 1979 or eight or whatever. I'm a teenager, fledgling race car driver, or want to be a race car driver. Somehow or another, I end up in a shop in Asheville, North Carolina, and I think it was Bosco Lowe, an old Bush driver. But in this shop was Butch Lindley and Jack Ingram, right? Most of people have heard of those guys. They were the best. And this was right before the Busch Grand National Series started. They were our late model sportsman champions. They won all the races. They they would tour around like we talked about earlier on this show. They'd go to the different tracks and chase these championship points. I think Butch had a Firestone deal. Jack had a Goodyear deal. They both were sponsored. They were winning all the races. I mean, if you're going to make it, if you're going to be able to make it, or just be able to pay your bills racing in those days, well, they were the best of the best. They had everything going for them, winning the races, sponsorship, tire deals, the whole deal. And I remember being in that shop and Jack and Butch talking about how things are so screwed up, right? Uh, NASCAR wouldn't help them with sponsorships. In fact, if they got a sponsor, NASCAR tried to take it from them, and just an hour or two of constantly bitching about the state of the sport and how bad it was, and you couldn't financially make it. And I'll never forget this. Butch Lindley, I remember he sat there, he said one time, he said, you know, it wouldn't surprise me at all, guys, if we go to Daytona in 2 or 3 years and that whole infield's nothing but a big marshland because the track's gone, the sport's gone. And as a young fledgling race car driver, I'm sitting there bug eyed looking at these heroes, listening to these guys, taking them for their word, and like, man, this is hell. If racing goes away, what am I going to do now? Because I want to race, right? And I always remember that conversation. And I've heard that same conversation my whole career, from that deal right there, right up through the Bush series, right up through the Cup series, the same conversation. Everything is wrong, and we got to have this. The model's wrong. It don't work. And But you know the only thing that ever changed, Charlie? The numbers would get bigger. It'd be more zeros out on everything. That's the only thing that ever changed. So, but what's going on now with the charter thing, it's a little bit different, but it's really the same basic problem, right? You've got the team owners and you've got NASCAR and you've got those two entities trying to come up with a solution. What they've got now that they didn't have back in those days, they've got a checkbook. And the checkbook is our television package, right? And so all they've got to do is figure out on this television. If you get $1 from that television deal, how much of that dollar goes where? That's what this whole argument's about. And I don't know the insides. I don't know what's going on. I know it seems like Denny shows his frustration, and then when Michael comes out and says that, he's just, he and Denny are on the same page, of course, right? Then you have other owners saying, "Yeah, we're far apart, but we're going to get it worked out." So, it's I mean, basically, what it amounts to, the team owners want more of that. They want more of that dollar, And for NASCAR to do that, it's either got to come away from NASCAR or it's got to come away from the tracks. So where are we? 65% tracks, 10% NASCAR, and the rest of the teams, right? Right now. So
Yes.
that number is what they're negotiating over, and what that number ends up being, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but you know, people talk about the people in the grandstands and the attendance now, what it used to be in the heyday, of course, is not like it used to be. And but the thing that kind of messed me up a little bit is when we came back, we were the first professional sport during COVID to come back. We were the very first professional sport to come back. And we did it for a few weeks. If you remember, we did it with the grandstands closed. Now, back in the day, there's no way you could have done that. The purse was totally paid by the ticket sales. That's how the promoters paid the purse. So when they ran those races and nobody in the grandstands, what does that tell you? Because the team still got paid. People got paid to be at the racetrack to do what work there was to do. Well, they got paid. Well, they got paid by TV money, you know. And that to me, that was a glaring. To me, it was like a glaring fact of, okay, now we're totally TV money now, right? That's where we're at as a sport. Uh, Even though we want to have fans at the racetrack to enjoy the thing, uh, so that tells you how much TV drives the sport. So that's where it's all at. I mean, that's where it's all at to me.
Okay, let's get into this. Our first what do we call it? Not gimmick. It's our weekly spiel of what's pissing Rick off. What word was I looking for there? Our weekly. I'm sorry. See, this is me. Our weekly segment. Our weekly segment. What's pissing Rick Mast off?
You
Anything
know,
today?
it is, and I'll tell you what caused this. I don't know why it did it, but we'll go back to COVID again. I live on near Interstate 81 in Virginia, and it's a main thoroughfare from the southeast to the northeast with trucks, big truck transportation. They ship their goods to Philly and New York and Boston. Anyhow, heavily traveled interstate. When COVID went on, I took a couple of videos riding down the interstate one time, and there wasn't a car in sight. And I sent it to some people at the driver's ed thing, and like, all right, kids, this is what it used to be like in the '70s when I first started driving '81. Right? Well, what happened when everything started breaking and everybody came back? For some reason, and maybe fans, you can answer this for me because I don't know the answer. But for some reason, when we came back from the COVID deal and the interstates got blocked or heavy again, everybody decided that instead of riding in the right lane or driving in the right lane, we're now going to drive in the left lane. You go up and down these friggin' interstates, everybody gets in the left lane, and that's where they ride. It's just like you're doing the same thing you used to do, but you're in the left lane instead of the right. So what that does is it makes you have to pass people on the right side. And when you go to pass them on the right side, instead of doing holding their speed, they want to speed up to keep from letting you pass them, right? And try to jam you in. Now, I'm not talking about a fool that comes up through you. If you're in the left lane, jacked up, jammed up, and a fool comes flying by, you're like, okay, where's he going, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people just lollygagging, riding down the damn interstate in the left lane on their cell phones, not a care in the world, jacking traffic up 5 miles behind them because they've already got beside a truck. Instead of passing them, they're just riding along in the left lane. right? Virginia, I noticed Virginia last week, they had all their road signs. Left lane is for passing only. Right in the right lane. Drive to right. And I've seen it in a couple other states that put these signs up. Ain't doing no good. There's that sheriff in Texas. I don't know if you've seen, he's got videos, that big tall dude. We've seen on TV a lot. He pulls people over riding in the left lane, right? And
Uh-huh.
finally, one time I saw him ticketed the guy. He would give him warnings. He finally gave a guy a ticket. But Charlie, that is what. And the only reason to say that, I drove to Atlanta the last 2 weekends and back, which is like an 8 hour drive for me. And I was up in Northern Virginia yesterday and ride the interstate so much. And it's like, man, you just get pissed off at people riding over there. And I don't know why. I don't, but I'm telling you right now, it happened after COVID. When they came back from COVID, everybody has to ride the left lane. I don't know what, I have no idea why.
COVID messed everything up. It's funny, if you
Oh,
go back,
oh.
and I hated every aspect of COVID except for maybe this one thing, which was, so at the time, I'm working at a TV station, and, some of the TV stations did work from home for a lot of their reporters and whatnot, but we actually went in the entirety of COVID. So we were going in every single day, and, that's the one thing that was a positive, was just that nice, easy ride to work and back
Yeah,
from work, because
yeah,
nobody was on the frickin' highway, and then you
yeah,
knew we had returned to normalcy when there was traffic again. So, okay,
yes.
also, we got, our other segment. I couldn't think of that word because 'cause I'm not very smart, but we have story time with, Rick Mast, and before I ask you about this week's story, I need to apologize because, by the way, I just posted just the clip on YouTube and X last night of your great stories about Davey Allison. It's about a
Right,
5-minute clip, so people can just
right.
check that out if they don't want to watch the full hour podcast. And I have to apologize because you were telling the story last week, and you said how you met Davey and he was a good guy, and then you said you got the message that your house burnt down, and I started to laugh because I thought that Davey was playing a prank on you. You know,
Oh,
the way you
oh.
started telling it, and so I started laughing because it sounded like Davey was playing a prank, and then I realized it's a true story, so I felt like a an ass. That's a great story, by the way, so people
Yeah.
can check that out. Anything you got this week, Rick, for story time with Rick?
Well, we always got story time, man. Let's see, where are we going? We're going to Darlington this week, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you a couple Darlington stories. We were there racing in the Busch Grand National race, and a typical deal. We there, and we're running real good in this Busch race, and it's Davy and I believe Daryl, and then me running first, second, third, and it starts raining, right? So we slow down, we pit or whatever we do. We come back out, and we're riding around, and it's still raining going into what is now turn one. And the flag stand was, of course, on the front stretch, on the back stretch now. And, you know, we go down through there to give one to go, and I go through three and four, and it's raining. I'm like, and then coming off of four, going down the front straightaway, it's not raining. One and two, it's not raining. Well, they give us one to go, and I'm like, I got a whole lap riding around here. I go back in three and four, it's raining, or in three. We come back around, they throw the green, right? So I take off. I mean, there's a Winston Cup guy, David. There's a Winston Cup guy there. I'm pretty sure it was Daryl. What Daryl, was Neil, whoever it was. But anyhow, so we go off on one and two wide open, go through the turn, come off two wide, flying wide open. And I could see up there in front of me rain going into turn three. I see rain. So I'm on the bumper and I'm like, well, man, these guys are Winston Cup veterans and stars. They know what they're doing, right? We go into turn three, and I'm just following them. Boom, boom, boom. All three of us clobber the wall. I mean, knock the crap out of the wall. And I'm like, well, shit, I knew that wasn't going to work, but I'm so dumb that I followed these guys into there. I come in there and my car's wrecked. And I'll never forget David Hoots. He ended up becoming director for many years in the Cup Series. He was working pit road that day. And Hoot always told me the story, and I didn't remember it. I got out of my car. I was mad. I went down there, I guess, just cussed him and land blasted him and the whole deal for letting us go back to green, And but that when you're young and you're gullible, and you look up to those guys so much, you think, well, he jumped off the cliff, and he's done it before. I can jump off the cliff. Ridiculous. But you know, Darlington, I tell you who learned me how to drive, or who taught me how to drive Darlington, and that was two guys, Earnhardt and Gant. We were running a bush racer one time, and I qualified very well. Might have been the time I qualified on the pole. anyhow, I was following Harry a little bit because Harry could win. Well, he had a very unique way of going through, which is what's now 1 and 2. The way he did it, the way I was doing it. I got behind him and uh, followed him for a while, and I'm like, oh, I've been doing this wrong. Then when I came up on Earnhardt going into turn what is now 3, I was right behind him down the straightaway. My car was a little faster. I caught him. We go into 3, and I thought something happened to his car, man, and I jammed on the brakes to keep from hitting him, right? And I followed him for a little bit. Then I realized what he was doing going into turn 3. He was going high and let out the gas way earlier than what I was doing, but he's back in the gas pretty early. But what he was doing was he's saving tires. Getting into turn, which is now 3, is a big deal for turning your tires up, or you would just go in there real easy. Now you wouldn't run as fast a lap that particular lap, but 10 laps from now you would be faster because you didn't wear off your tires going into that turn. So that was that was a pretty cool deal that I learned. And then golly, Darlington. Oh, I'll tell you something else going on in Darlington this weekend. They got the alumni. If we talked about this, they got NASCAR's formed what they call a NASCAR alumni group, right? And I'm a member, and I think you got to have raced or be involved in 100 races, cup races, to be in this group. And I'm not sure. I know it's in the infancy stage right now. I'm not sure what all's going on. I know some of the stuff that they're trying to get done, they want to do in the future with us guys and the guys that came along before. And I mean, they've really reached out. They've really done a good job. And this thing kind of came from the top. I heard uh, Mike was telling Mike Helton said Jim France kind of came up with this something we got to do something to try to take care of the guys that are still alive that were in our sport for years, right? And then I know Kenny he's taken uh well, he says I'm the one that did it because he's on the boat with Chip Wiley somewhere on a boat somewhere fishing. And he says I'm the one that made that suggestion. So then I've heard somebody else say, well, I'm the one that made the suggestion. So I don't know who actually made the suggestion, right? Well, I guess they all made the suggestion, and maybe that's what happened. Enough people bitched about it, they decided to do something to do that. But anyhow, at Darlington, I mean, we got to go down there third Saturday and Sunday. They're going to do a dinner, and they're going to do autograph sessions. You're going to do meet and greets. You're going to do stuff with the current drivers and the alumni group. I'm not sure. There's a lady with NASCAR that's heading this up, and it's going to be fun to see what comes out of this. You know what I'd like to do with it, Charlie? And I told him, I said, I would love somehow, as this thing goes forward, I would love to somehow try to bridge publicly to the fans, bridge the gap from us, our drivers, to the group now, right? Because if you look back at in my era, it's almost mystical when you get to talking about that. You see people talking about my era. And again, it's almost mystical to these people, like with Earnhardt, and Daryl and all those guys. And somehow we've lost the connection from my era and group to the current era. And my take is the guys that are there, yeah, they're more polished, they're more corporate, they're all that, but they're still friggin' race car drivers, man. They're still in that car trying to do the exact same thing, no different that I did or anybody before me did, right? So that's the connection. So I don't know if we could, and I've mentioned this to a couple of those folks with the alumni group, somehow or another trying to do that. What do you think? You think that'd be, how can we do that? You think that'd be a good deal?
I think it's a great idea. And obviously I'm biased when I'm about to say this because clearly here we are. People are watching this on YouTube and listening on podcasts. But I think what we're doing right now, what you're doing right now helps that. Not
Yeah,
just with the fans. I mean, you're telling great stories from your era. And here's a good example. I was at the gym yesterday and I had a guy come up to me and he said, "Man, I love what you're doing with the NASCAR stuff." He brought up our show that's just been going a couple weeks and obviously everything that's going on with Kenny. This kid's
right.
probably, I don't know, maybe 25, 28, whatever it is. And just think about that generation of fans. I'm sure they've heard of Earnhardt and Rusty
Right,
Wallace, but
right.
and even for myself, I don't know all these great stories, every single one of them. I'm saying, I know kind of the big ones, but I think these podcasts, it's all to me, it's storytelling. It's
Yeah,
telling these great stories. And if you ever want a young driver or a guy from your generation to come on and you guys can tell stories, we should do that as well. I
okay.
do think this space of content is really helping bridge that gap. When you're seeing Dale Earnhardt download and he's interviewing all the old guys,
Right,
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 and the crew chiefs,
right.
and they're talking about the engineering or the innovation and some cheating here and there. People love that shit. I really think that maybe there's a renaissance from your era that's coming back through these podcasts and YouTube. And again, I'm biased, but I do think it
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. Well, it was so colorful, you know.
Yes.
I mean, I was there. I mean, I was there and we witnessed the explosion and all that. And the characters we had, the drivers, the man, the excitement that was just the aura of excitement being in that garage and being at that racetrack. I mean, you can't get into tracks, you can't get out of them. There's just hordes of people, and everybody's for that. I remember one time Kyle Petty, we were sitting there in the mid '90s, sometime or another, and we were talking about our sport. You know, we were all sitting there kind of in amazement about what was going on, right? Because we're just in there doing our thing. We don't really Earnhardt got it. He was probably the first one that got it, and he brought some people along with him. But you didn't really get what was going on outside of our garage area, right? I'll never forget. Excuse me. Kyle Petty said we were talking about that. Kyle Petty said, "Y'all watch any TV?" I said, "He watch TV." Yeah, you need to watch news report. Watch some news and stuff. What are you talking about, Kyle? Look at when they do news reports from inner cities. Look at something going on in the inner cities, whether it be a crime going on or something going on. What are you talking about, Kyle? All the inner city kids, look at what they're wearing. I said, what do you mean? Look at what they're wearing. They've all got friggin' racing jackets on. Inner city kids, right? Black and white in like the later 90s, whether it be Detroit, Chicago, New York, all these inner city kids have got our friggin' racing jackets on, right? I'm like, what the hell? How's this happening? Right? What is this all about? You know, it was hard for me to fathom. In fact, it was hard for all of us to fathom. But over a period of time, you learned, you kind of you kept seeing all these things happen, right? Just like when we go to Indy and you sell the place out the first time. You hadn't been in there ever. You go there in '94 and you can't buy a ticket, standing room only. And everything that went on all through the next 10 years, right? You're like, man, you're involved in this, but why? Why is this so exciting? Because I don't get it. I know Daryl. I know Michael. We're not that special, believe me. But the thing that happened, one of the things we're talking about our growth, one of the things that I tell this all the time, we were we we profited or we gained from the MLB strike, whatever year that was. I forget what year that was.
94 into 95.
Right. When they went on strike, we gained from that. There's a definite numbers that came out that we gained fans and popularity from the MLB strike, you know, and all the things that causes, right? But it was just amazing to me what went on, and it was like it was like it seemed like, and I tried to think about it. It was like we're almost the last part of Americana, things that were going on, baseball, hot dogs, you know what I mean? You can't, yeah, all right, we took baseball away. Well, these drivers, and everybody could relate to our drivers, and I talk about that all the time. As a fan, you got if you're a hero, if you've got a hero, somehow at some level, you've got to be able to relate to that guy to be your hero. And with Earnhardt, working man, dirt poor farmer, Bill Hill guy, didn't have a pot to pee in, and people related to that. Harry Gant sitting there hanging sheetrock with his head, building the houses. People related to that, right? And then they saw them on TV and the way they conducted themselves, the way they talked, the way they acted. It was a grown man. It was hero material, right? It's just like this is like Americana, and it's the last part of Americana. And I really think that's what transformed across the country to get the other areas of the country so hyped up on our sport. It was just and I think it goes back to the characters in our sport and the way we were presented, the way we presented ourselves or were presented by the media. Because you had
Yeah.
you had you had the Tom Higgins and the Steve Wades of the world. They would talk about negative stuff, but they would also, they would build the sport up. They would build the drivers up as gladiators, modern day gladiator. I think one of them said one time, right? and Ken Squire, all those guys, all that stuff fed into it. And, just such an exciting time. And if we can somehow or another bridge those stories into these guys now and incorporate some of this stuff with those guys, right, that we've got now, because they've all got to have personalities. We know that. I mean, they're all different personalities, but they're stifled so much because of the way it is. And you have somebody like Denny that's coming out with his show. This causes so much stir in our sport, right? And I just think we could do more of that and get the fans more connected to the guys in the way we did it, the way it happened, and the way the journalists did it. I mean, it's not just the drivers. I mean, I think journalists have to buy into this also, right? And but I think there's an opportunity here to do that, Charlie. We'll see.
Yeah. When you were in it, let's say in the mid 90s, could you feel how amazing it was? Or do you think also I think there's also this always you're yearning for yesteryear. We all do this to your high school days, but I think with NASCAR specifically, it's fair to say it was better. So I'm wondering when you saw the Rainbow Warrior going around or Dale Earnhardt in the black number 3, could you feel that it was iconic? I'm just wondering because a couple minutes ago you used the word colorful, and I think that's a perfect description for it. And here's why. So I'm a member of NASCAR Media, so I go on the NASCAR Media site all the time to get pictures. And I'm telling you, there's something about the pictures from your era once they become color. And it's almost better that they're not so high resolution HD. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
even the fact that they're just a little fuzzier, it makes
yeah,
you think of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I'm telling you, the colors pop. When you see
yeah,
the stands, the fans, the colors they're wearing pop, the
yeah.
cars pop. Everything looks sunny, everything looks happy. It does feel like Americana. I'm telling you, I've had that exact same thought as I go through. If I'm doing a story on any particular older driver, I always put their search into NASCAR Media and I look at the old pictures. And I have this thought every single time because these pictures are so damn cool.
Yeah, it's like I remember Tony Stewart one time said the best looking race car he ever saw was that green and black number one skull car of Rick Mast, right? I remember he made that comment one time. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool because that was in 1990, what, 5? You know what I'm saying?
Uh huh.
But that era car. Another thing that happens too, Charlie, in those days, when we started Daytona, whatever our car was, the color and the scheme, it was the same every week for 36 races or whatever, all through the year. When you turn the TV on and go to the racetrack, you could pick out the one Rick Masco car easy, right? You always pick out the black 3 car, but you could pick out the yellow 30 Michael Walter car. You could pick them, the Shirley Marl. You could pick all these guys out real easily. And they were a lot simpler in their schemes, And I listen, man. I don't know anything about that crap. I'm not an artist. I don't know anything about it. I know when something looks good. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how to make it look good. But if it looks good at the end, I can tell you. If it looks bad, I can tell you. Right. But I think it was just so many components. That what you're talking about is one of them. That was just one of the components. And maybe it was keeping it simple a little bit and people could follow. Because like right now, I mean, I watch the races every week, and man, I have to look and look and look and look and look and study. In fact, it's gotten now to where if there's somebody I'm wanting to follow that day because of some storyline I'm interested in, or I've been told some inside secret about, right? I'll find that driver in that car and I'm looking, all right, what scheme has he got today? And I'll try to pick him out as they're going around pre-race and find him. And then during the race, I'm trying to find that car, right? And it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Back in those days, it was very easy. You didn't have to look at a pre-race deal to know what car you're looking for. So, but with the with the sponsorship being what it is and have to run different color schemes, I mean that's what we got to do now. I mean, I get it. That's the way it is. We can't put one color on that car and a sponsor and keep it the same all year. Those days are gone.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. That is a huge deal. I don't know how to fix it. I know RFK, they were thinking about maybe trying to keep the same color scheme throughout a season, even though the sponsors change. But
And
I think that's a
they've got some good schemes right now, by the way. But anyway,
yes.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think about baseball. So baseball is different though because you just have two teams, right? You have for the most part your road uniforms, your home uniforms. Every once in a while they'll do a throwback, which people like, but it's pretty easy even if they're doing a, let's say, a throwback or a tribute to the Negro Leagues, whatever it is. It's pretty easy that day to figure out who's who in a baseball game. But
Right.
NASCAR with 40 or something cars, it's a different deal. And I know Bobby Labonte brought this up, and he said, look, the second we kind of went away from the one color scheme, you just lose that branding. And
Mhm.
so so in the last few years, I feel like, you could usually know Logano's yellow. And up until this year, I mean, Denny Hamlin with FedEx, but now I feel
Right.
like Mavis is all over that car. And
Right.
even Chase Elliott with Napa, I feel like most of the time. But
Right.
man, I feel like now, I don't know the primaries, how many races most of those get, but I agree with you. I think you're trying to find out, oh, who is that? Oh, that's a blue car. Who is that? I think that's a big deal that NASCAR needs to figure out, because when you talk about the iconic branding, it's hard to establish that brand without the consistent colors and the consistent car.
Mhm. That's true. I mean, if that's what you want to do, you go back. You saw that green white car, right? That's Harry Gant. That's that Skull car. You saw the black one, of course, Earnhardt. You saw just all those guys. It was very, very easy to pick them out. Very easy to identify. It's hard now to do that. It's hard to identify. I don't know this. I think if we've got 100 things that we can fix or work on, that's just one of 100 things. All right. I don't know how prominent it is, but it is an issue. There's no way around it. And same way with the drivers. One of the problems when NASCAR got so popular, a lot of the guys, we had to be older to become a cup racer, until Jeff came along and Tony came along. That's when the whole thing changed to where it is now. If you're 30 years of age, man, you're over the hill. You're too old. But one of the things that happened, these guys raced the all the short tracks, right? The Hickories, the Birmingham, Alabamas, the Hialeah Speedway, the New Hampshire, I mean, Oxford Plains. And these guys became stars locally, okay? And then, gosh, then they would start touring with the Busch Series, and then the name got going. So by the time a guy got to the Cup, a lot of fans already knew this guy, and they just naturally would follow this guy from different parts of the South or the East Coast, right? And they follow these guys. And then you bring a Californian in like Jeff Gordon, right? That people really didn't know in the Southeast, but they got to know Jeff because he won so much. And then he became the arch enemy of Earnhardt because he's an outsider, California kid coming in here. But it made for great stories and great racing. Uh, Today these guys come in at 20 years of age. All of a sudden, you turn on the TV, their starting fifth is whoever it is, right? And you're like, who's this guy? Never heard of him. And you're, you know, more than a passive race fan, and you keep up with racing. And you're like, who is this guy running the top series? I don't never heard of him or don't know him. So then you have to learn to know about this guy or learn about this guy watching the cup race each Sunday, right? And those guys are put in a bad position because they don't have the experience and all that. But I don't know that's one thing that hurts a little bit. I think we've got to get back to having these guys as heroes. I mean, these guys have got to be. They don't necessarily have to be heroes, but they got to be personaed as heroes somehow. And that, as you say, it comes natural, doesn't come forced, right? But anyhow, I digress here. I digress.
No, I love it. Okay, let's end on this topic. You and I were talking about this a little bit before we pressed record. And you're a baseball fan, big Braves fan. I'm a huge baseball fan. I live in St. Louis, and right now, St. Louis Cardinal fans are as pissed as I've ever seen them. And I've been here, what,
Oh,
16 years. This is my
yeah,
17th season. And I
yeah.
covered the Cardinals a lot and still do. I have a separate YouTube channel that's just for Cardinals if people want to check that out. It's called Charlie Marlowe 590 The Fan, KFNS. But you were
Cool.
kind of remarking about how, fans always want everybody to be fired, GM, coaches, managers, players. And I always like talking to athletes about this because I'm sure, look, there's probably a time in your career somebody wanted Rick Mast fired or Rick Mast crew chief or owner or this guy can't do his job. So I think athletes always have a different perspective than media folks. So you think there's too much of that, just too many fans kind of bitching and always wanting everybody to get fired after every loss?
Dude, when the Braves won when they won the World Series, I said Super Bowl. Crap. When they won the World Series, we go in, I guess the next year, we get in some kind of slump, right? You cut on Twitter, which is now X. And I'm telling you, dude, it just gives you, it gave me a headache reading Snitker needs to be fired. Brian Snitker, he's our manager. He's the manager of the
Mhm.
Braves. He's old school. He doesn't do analytics. He's not. He's hard headed. On and on and on and on and on. And he needs to be fired. Needs to be fired. Like Tony Bennett, one of the top five, in my opinion, top five college basketball coaches in this country. I watched what he did at UVA for the last 15 years. I mean, if UVA got an NIT bid, man, they were jumping up and down the streets of Charlottesville, happy, right? Tony Bennett comes along. Well, if we don't win a championship, hell, Bennett needs to be replaced, right? He had an off year this year, and I've never seen so much negative stuff in my life. Bennett's old school. The NIL's passing him by. Everything. He can't do this. He can't do that. And I'm like, dude, he's done one. He's got the biggest winning percentage in ACC the last 10 years of any coach, of any team. He won you a national championship. What in the hell is wrong with you people, right? So when he catches it, St. Louis, your group is catching it. When the Atlanta Braves just come off of a World Series and that manager's catching it, how can you pay any attention to this crap? How can you, as a normal thinking fan, read this crap and be like, no, 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 no? It's like what we did in the past don't matter? Yes, it matters. I mean, you hear that so much in sports as an athlete. What I did last week don't matter this week, right? Well, it does matter because you've got a pattern. You know how to win. You know you're a champion. You know how to do it all, right? You can't go out there and play the game. You can't hit the damn ball for the manager. You've got to hit it yourself. You can't catch it. The manager ain't out there doing that. They just fired a couple of who was the Lakers and somebody else fired their coaches, right?
Mhm.
And all because of the way I understand it, journalistic, journalistic stuff. Everybody getting down on these coaches and the head offices not having the balls or the wherewithal or whatever you call it to stand firm and know what they're doing and know they're right, and doing the right thing. They just wither up to social media, right? And but golly, I know I feel for you, Charlie. I feel for you because I know what you're going through with the Cardinals right now. And listen, dude, whatever the problems are, they'll get fixed. It's too good an
Mhm.
organization, right? It's just like the Braves, too good of an organization. It'll get fixed. Like UVA, too good of a head coach. It'll get fixed. Jesus Christ.
I'm very passionate about this topic, and it's not just specific to the Cardinals. It's again because I've worked in media my whole life, and this goes back to when I worked in TV, but also now as I do YouTube. And I've done my own little studies on this, where I'll see if you put out a video, the comments are always, you know, very irrational. But I'll look and like, let's say a video gets 2,000 views. There's only about 1, 2, or 3% of the people. It's usually about 1% comment, right? They're very negative. Most people watch the video. And by the way, we want everyone to comment. I'm not trying to shit
Yeah.
on commenters, but I'm saying some people like to get riled up, but most people just consume the podcast or the video and they just don't comment. And I think what we do is this happens in politics, by the way, all the time. And this happened in TV. I saw this all the time. My news directors and people would be like, oh, these people on Twitter are saying this. We gotta go talk to these people. I'm like, these people are crazy. I'm thinking, why are we giving more of a microphone to the
Right.
craziest 1% of the people?
Right.
This is the amount of people, these are the people that are bitching on X. And I feel like we amplify it more. We go, everybody's bitching on X. And I'm like, no, the loudest 1% minority is bitching on X. And then we're amplifying it by even talking about it more.
Giving them a platform. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. But Charles, my girls played sports all through high school. They played softball, volleyball, basketball, right? We did travel teams, we did all that. And really, the same stuff would go on there, at these ball games, but it'd be two or three in the grandstands instead of them being on Twitter or X doing it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like criticism. I remember, dude, man, when I was a little boy, there used to be two publications. One was called Southern Motorsports Journal, and I can't remember the other one. It was just a little pamphlet. It would come once a week. My dad subscribed to it, and it was all about Cup racing. Have stories about Cup racing. It would probably be maybe 4 or 5 pages. It would fold out big, but it'd be like that. And every week, and I was thinking the other day about this, because at one time I remember the guy's name, but every week there'd be one guy that have a letter to the editor, and they would always have 2 or 3 letters to the editor, and these guys were bitching every week. There was one guy always bitched about something, and it dawned on me one time here a couple 3 years ago. This ain't it. I was reading all that crap. This is no different than what it used to be in the '60s, but the same stuff was going on, but they only could get 2 or 3 letters in there. So I'm like,
Yep.
this stuff is always out there. They've just got an outlet for it now. And how do we take that and not hurt our sport? Because of the negativity, right? People read that and it becomes negative. So it's just something we gotta help somehow.
I love it. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out this problem as the podcast goes on. Let's
Okay.
let's end on that note. Rick, have a great time at Darlington. By the way, to everybody, apologize. Our audio on the last episode wasn't great. We got new mics and new computer programs. We're figuring it out. So thank you. But that was a great podcast. And like I said, people are also watching, listening to your Davey Allison stories, Rick, which were great. And I think this one was great as well. So we'll get it out as quick as possible so people can watch and listen. And Rick, thank you as always, sir. This was a good time.
Thanks, folks. See you next time.